peace, which is when you're preparing for war or preparedness, your best people are in acquisitions and in training. Here in the army, it's still the same. The best people are still going to DGMO. The people who go into acquisitions, the acquisition wing, are those who are on the verge of retirement, who have got 1 year or 2 years left to go. There's no research. The army doesn't do the kind of research that it needs. So they are also partly to blame for this entire thing of being unable to buy anything. They're the worsted of all the services.
So the second question, I think, if I'm permitted, this is about, when you said that a public-private partnership, and I believe there is some kind of a policy relating to defense offset.
Yes, yes.
And that defense offset, there are lots of stories going around,
right,
that this defense offset is not actually getting off the ground.
You're absolutely
and there is
correct.
a lot of things which are happening behind the scene, which is by way of corruption.
Yes.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a result of which, the genuine private sector enterprises are reluctant to get into the defense business.
No, the offsets has been a disaster. What has happened is that South Korea, incidentally, I forgot to mention that, is one of the ways they actually energized the South Korean defense industry was through offsets. They told the offsets, in short, are the government tells the foreign manufacturer, the foreign equipment seller, that you have to put in buy a certain percentage of your of the hardware from within the country. So in a contract like the MMRCA, 50% of the thing will have to be bought by the French from India. But the problem is there are a number of problems there. What are the kind of stuff that the foreign vendors can buy from India? We don't, a lot of times they discover that the Indian industry is not up to that scale of a tender. We are talking of $20 billion. If you have to buy $10 billion of what from India for a high technology thing like, aircraft manufacturing? That is one thing. So that's the reason that offsets have been a disaster. There have been just 2 or 3, a handful of cases of offsets actually taking off. There are probably 2 cases. And people are very reluctant to put money into the country because of this. In fact, just last month, there was a huge joint venture between British Aerospace, BAE, and Mahindra & Mahindra. That collapsed, BAE pulled out. They said, we've had it with the Indian market after 5 years of waiting. So offsets, it would have been, and there's also this talk of it being misused for corruption and those kind of, that's also a very big concern, because this is seen as one way of rerouting money into, into under the table.
So the indigenization obviously cannot take place.
Yeah, because the whole system, as I said, is process driven. There is no result that people want. I mean, they just want to see we followed this process, this is what we've done. But what is the result? Nothing is translated onto the ground. The Indian armed forces are as bad as they were 10 or 20 years back. I mean, it's like the Kargil thing hasn't, nothing has changed since Kargil, unfortunately. It's a very gloomy forecast, I know, but I mean, that's the way it is.
To answer your question on offset, a client of ours came from New York, put up a unit in Chennai, and another one at Arizona. The Chennai unit closed. The Arizona one is supplying parts to Pentagon, the same parts, the same industry, the same entrepreneur. But the offset business in India never took off. So offset has been almost a congenital policy, it never took off. Rohan Abhyankar asks you, we always say we have to learn from our mistakes. What have we actually done or should we do when China have completed the strategy of string of pearls? Second is, apart from missiles, are we using or utilizing DRDO enough? 2 questions. String of pearls and DRDO.
String of pearls, well, that continues. I mean, that's almost like the great game in the Indian Ocean. So it basically means that the Chinese are going to ring us around with bases around the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. That continues. And my point is that, instead of crying about the Chinese doing this, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to counter the Chinese? I mean, this is like that thing of schoolboy name calling, oh, ye kar raha, but you step up and you start doing something. You should do a counter strategy. You engage the countries around China then. You start building up relationships with the South Koreans, with the Japanese, with the Filipinos, the Vietnamese, with Singapore, with the United States. Yeah, with Vietnam. But we're still very diffident, you know, when it comes, there's something about us that we can't stand up to the Chinese. There is this, I don't know if it's the defeat of 1962 or what it is, but when it comes to Pakistan, we are tigers, you know, we'll stand up and we'll shout and scream and stuff. But when it comes to China, it's almost like we've been defeated in the mind, mentally, you know. So that's a very big problem. So my only response to that is that we have to do a counter strategy of pearls. I mean, we have to have, again, I mean, back to that thing of vision. Which we don't have, unfortunately. I mean, the Chinese are here, they're in Gwadar, just across the Arabian Sea. They've actually complicated things. I was with somebody in the Navy today. He said that the Chinese presence in Gwadar has actually complicated the Indian Navy strategy in several very serious ways. Because the Chinese can tomorrow stand there and tell us that, look, we are here, our ships are traveling through here, don't you dare. And the government will listen to them because, like I said, we've almost been defeated by the Chinese mentally. So it's like this, if you've seen this thing of these Russian dolls called Matrushka dolls, a doll within a doll. That is the Chinese strategy when it comes to Pakistan. You have Pakistan on the outside, but it's the Chinese inside. They've taken up portions of the northern provinces of Pakistan. They're building this huge railroad energy gas line, pipeline into Gwadar, ostensibly for their own security energy needs, because they get a lot of their oil from the Persian Gulf. So they say that, look, we are doing this to safeguard our national interests, but we have to actually look at our national interests as well and, you know, have a counter strategy, which we clearly don't. I mean, today it's Pakistan, tomorrow it's going to be Maldives, Sri Lanka was day before yesterday. So I think the ring is shrinking around us very rapidly. And we don't have very long before probably the Chinese land up here in Arunachal or wherever else. So, sorry, your other question was on the DRDO.
Apart from missiles, is
Right.
DRDO doing anything meaningful?
Well, the problem with the DRDO is that they haven't been able to effectively deliver on national defense, primarily because they are not working as closely with the armed forces as they should. If you look at the United States, the DRDO borrows from an organization called the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Planning Organization, which works very closely with the armed forces of the United States. So they deliver results. The DRDO is, again, back to that Ashokan Alliance thing. You have the DRDO looking in that direction. You have the armed forces looking here. You have the Ordnance Factory Board looking in a third direction, and the politician is looking in a totally different direction. The DRDO does not work for the armed forces. It works for the defense minister. The DRDO chief calls himself the scientific advisor to the Raksha Mantri, which is bigger than his post of, he holds three hats. He wears Secretary R&D, DRDO chief, and SA to the RM. So he's accountable only to the defense ministry. It's only the Navy which has kind of figured this out because they've made the DRDO more accountable. They've worked very closely with them. The Navy hasn't surrendered its core competence of shipbuilding. They've held on to it. They make the DRDO and the shipyards a little more accountable. Whereas the Air Force and the Army, they're totally out of the picture. Services are also to blame to some extent with what happened with the Arjun tank. It's a very fine example. It's a good tank. The Army should have settled for Mark 1 of that tank. But they've been pressurizing the DRDO over years. No, we want Mark 4. The first tank should be a tank that should be ready to fly. You know? So they're unwilling to accept a basic tank. And then you go on improving that tank. You make Mark 1, you make Mark 2, make Mark 3, incrementally as you use it. But the Army has laid this, you know, all or nothing kind of approach. And the Air Force also, to an extent, is to blame for the light combat aircraft delays. So these are the three critical areas that the DRDO, but in areas where the DRDO has really delivered, that, and to their credit, is the missile technology, that they have actually given you intercontinental ballistic missile without any foreign assistance. So, and here's a story that in areas where nobody will sell you technology, like nuclear weapons, nobody will sell you a nuclear weapon blueprint unless your name is Dr. A.Q. Khan, or or the Chinese sell you a blueprint. But no, in areas where no one sells you technology, critical technology like missile technology or bomb technology, India has made rapid advances on its own. But in area which is, areas like conventional weaponry and all that, which anyone will sell you equipment, there we are very content to buy from abroad. 70% of our needs come here. So we need to get that urgency that we show in our strategic sector where DRDO holds some part of. We need to show that urgency in the conventional arms sphere as well.
There's a question on Vinay Menon, which you already touched, I believe. Any reason why India does not manufacture arms and ammunition? What could be the possible remedy? I think you've touched it.
Is it the Gandhian philosophy or? No, but this is something that I've never really understood. But if you see foreign leaders like Cameroon, the British Prime Minister, the French President, the Russian President, the American President, they all make strong pitches for their defense industry. They come here, they tell the Prime Minister, you need to buy our arms. They're the best in the world. You must buy it. Because they have this whole thing of the connection of arms with, the job creation within their constituency, within their country, and the creation of skills, those high technology jobs that I told you about, that Israel so jealously works on year after year. But somehow here, that's never a topic of discussion or debate. That, the fact that the Tata gun, for instance, the defense minister should be selling it pushing it in other countries around the littoral. And that actually has implications on foreign policy as well. Because if you don't make anything of your own, arms sales, by the way, are a very, very powerful component of your foreign policy. The Chinese, for instance, have used cheap arms as a way of getting into Africa, into Sri Lanka, into Pakistan. More than half of Pakistan's arsenal, incidentally, is Chinese arms, cheap Chinese arms. They'll give them warships, fighter jets. The qualitative edge is the American technology, but the quantitative edge, the real numbers, come from Chinese arms. And the Chinese are happy to sell. For them, arms is an instrument of national policy. It creates jobs at home, and it also furthers Chinese strategic interests. But here, because we don't make anything, we are content to not push it at all. And what we actually make is, it's pathetic. We make parachutes. The Ordnance Factory Board makes uniforms, tents. If you see the export list, we are somewhere way down there, and our clients are in Africa. Some of the Arabian countries buy from us. It's pathetic because we don't make anything. If you don't make anything, you can't export anything. If you can't export anything, you don't get leverage. You don't get foreign policy leverage on those countries. So, it's a lose-lose situation for us.
Ashwin Shroff comments, money is important but not all important. Examples he gives are the Vietnam War, Israel and Afghans, also South Korea. You need to focus an ecosystem to pursue goals, is what he comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Because in Vietnam, look at the Viet Cong, much smaller force, were able to, they're probably the only country in the world that's defeated 3 superpowers in the 20th century. And we shouldn't actually get carried away by this entire thing of equipment also. Because at the end of the day, it's training and how you utilize that money. Someone in the defense ministry told me that it's funny that in the days where we had little money, when we had little money to spend, we were actually spending it more efficiently because we had very little. But now we've come to a time when we've got we've got surplus funds that we're unable to spend. There is this paralysis that comes in from scams and corruption issues that we're unable to spend that money. And the other thing about this, just to go back to 2611, we kept talking about how our policemen didn't have AK-47s and modern equipment and all that. One policeman with a functioning 303 rifle, and if he knew how to use that 303 rifle, could have eliminated those 2 terrorists on VT station, and they would not have gone on to create the kind of havoc that they did. They killed 6 police officers, they killed many more people in Kama Hospital. That would not have happened if one policeman had one functional rifle. Forget an AK-47 or an M16, a functional 303 rifle which he knew how to use. But the Mumbai police has what, 10 rounds per policeman in 10 years or something like that? It's some ridiculous figures like that.
Yes.
This was the failure of the machinery because the police comes under political persons and there was a delay in creating this thing, which if that was not there, then this 2611 would not have happened.
Right.
Because of the politicians controlling the police.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Mr. Prakash Singh, who's probably one of the finest IPS officers we've produced, he's told me this once, that the police forces in states have become militias. They have become like what in the old days when you had princely kingdoms, you had the state forces. So he says police forces have become state forces today. They're accountable to only the politicians. And the politicians they keep them hungry so that they will always depend on them. And
The fishermen, they had said at the Colaba that these things happening, but information to go and to become an actual implementation of the action against girls was delayed for this reason.
Right. And if you look at it, there was a case, if you think of them as active shooters, there's a term in the US which calls people who are using weapons and walking very quickly and killing a lot of people. They're called active shooters. You have these things. You had that case of the Batman killer in the theater and in one of the Scandinavian countries.
And the West were completely ineffective.
Yes. So the point is that for such threats of active shooters, you cannot wait for the NSG to come from Delhi or for the army to come from Kolaba. You have to have the policemen on the spot to respond to that event. This is what happened in Fort Worth, Texas, a couple of years back. There was a shooting incident where a US Army major picked up a weapon and decided to start killing his inmates. So there were two policemen, off-duty policemen, who were going home, and they said, "What's that? That's shooting. What happened?" Someone said, "Someone's shooting." A US policewoman just took out her weapon. She went, looked for the guy, and bang, knocked him down. So immobilized him. So the first responder has to be the policeman on the site. I mean, if you don't equip and train your policemen, I mean, you're opening up yourself up to very, very, grave national security implications, because, like we've seen in 2611.
Two quick questions.